What's happening, people? Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're doing well. Now, we all know that most people have poorly defined and ill understood notions of reality and existence, what they are and what this world is. But we can't really sit too well as human beings with this gap in our mind about these things, these topics. So we fill them with a placeholder, a universal placeholder called capital G, God. And by default, unless there's some cultural massaging and programming to modify that, almost everyone attributes perfection to this entity, to this being, to this ideal. And I think we do this mainly because we need that level of surety and protection and care in our mind to rest and move forward in life with some ease and some comfort. But that type of God, a perfected God, is not alive. And I think it serves us well to understand, digest, and internalize that for existential sake, for our own enhancement of life. And the reason that I say that a perfected God is not alive is because I think the greatest differentiator between a living and non-living thing is change. So seemingly, a living being has infinitely more degrees of freedom, depending on its place on the spectrum of complexity, seemingly, than a non-living thing. A non-living thing has zero capacity to create novelty and new information and movement and action, where a living being has a greater degree. So I believe that's the main differentiator. So if we see a being that does not have mental or physical evolution over time, then I don't think we can consider it a living thing. I think we must require and necessitate from life movement in some way, internally, externally, even if it's passive, through space and time. I think we must do that. And really, by the same conceit, I don't think we can consider God unalive, because even a non-living thing experiences motion relative to other objects in space-time, and it undergoes continual quantum fluctuation. So I say that a perfected God is not alive because you need some variation. You need some distinction and some differentiation just to have information. And a living being would seemingly need something to experience. Something would require information by the way we conceive of this reality physically and mathematically, right? And, psychologically to a degree. So you need some information to experience, because we don't necessarily attribute the experience of no thing or nothingness to life. That's what we would call death typically, or non-life. And even if we break it down to a more fundamental physical level, you still need some movement in some way. You need an exchange of energy at a very, very basic minimum in this universe to have the inkling or the beginning of a living thing. You need a change of energy states, whether it be from one field of energy to another field. You need a transference of energy or a change of energy states, even at a mere quanta of energy. You need at least that much before there's any hope for a non-living thing to be transformed into a living thing. There must be some evolution, and obviously you need that change to create information to experience. However, we're not going to get this change in a perfected being, in a perfected state, because we're talking about the concept, the ideal, the reality of something that is so impossibly right that there's just no way to improve or enhance it. It'd actually be easier to add a billion years, maybe even just a second, on to the end of eternity than it would be to improve and enhance perfection, because by comparison, everything is inferior, including us. If we were to, or anyone else or anything else was to attempt to improve and enhance perfection by being inferior, we would degrade it. And by degrading perfection, we necessarily erode and destroy the perfected state. So I'm alive, you're alive, we're alive. And if your concept of God undergoes change, experiences change, has thought, desire, or movement of any kind, then it's alive by some stretch of the imagination, if you want to think of it like that. But it is not perfect. Now, I'm not religious, clearly, and I don't necessarily think we need an explanation or a reason for the universe and life to exist. But I do believe that pondering these things, pondering these ideas, these topics, illuminates a great deal about us. It informs us about the world and about ourselves. But it may not necessarily illuminate or pull the covers back directly on the nature of this reality and existence. Not directly, but it does bring a lot to us. And I actually think this is a perfect tie-in to a video that I made a few months back about Scott Adams' book called God's Debris, and the story in that, a very brief book by the same name. Theory by the same name, called basically We're God's Debris. That's the theory, and the understanding is that God destroyed itself to allow for the formation of the universe, for the existence of the universe, individuation, distinction, and also ourselves. And whether you believe that or not, whether you believe it to be a plausible explanation, it's an interesting one. And I think that what it does is it illuminates an potentially even more interesting idea or question or topic, and that is the notion that God, if there is a God, now we're just talking hypothetically, theoretically, philosophically, metaphysically here. If there is a God, then God is potentially simultaneously the greatest right and the greatest wrong in the universe because of this perfected state. Now, you can see God as being the greatest right in creating or performing the greatest act of love by destroying what just can't be outdone to afford us an opportunity to live and experience and to know and to undergo change in a sense. By the same token, by the inverse, you could consider God the greatest wrongdoer, the greatest evil, or the greatest bad in the universe by destroying simply what was right to create us and our experience and the life and the mess that we make. So no matter how you want to look at it, no matter how you want to think about it, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting posit that God may be the greatest bad and the greatest right simultaneously if God is a perfected being that destroyed the stuff to allow for the universe. Now, I have no bones in this fight, but I'd like to know what you think. I'd like to know whether you believe God is the greatest wrong, the greatest right, whether a perfected being can be alive, or whether God is even the right way to think about this. Now, I interchange God, the notion, it's just a concept to me. I interchange God with the universe, with mind, with consciousness, all of the time. But no matter what you conceive of, if you believe it to be perfect, I'm saying that you've negated the possibility for it to be a living thing, a living entity, a living concept. So let me know what you think once again in the comment section below, or send me the questions privately at questions@lexbenjamin.com, and I will see you on the next one. So thank you for watching this one. You have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And later. That's all.